here, and we want to welcome you to this session of discussion on grading and assessment. And I'm so glad you all have joined us this evening. Preethi, you want to say something?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again. Thank you all so much for accepting our request to be here.
We are all here, and we want to welcome you to this session of discussion on grading and assessment.
I hear an echo. Is that from
I'm so glad that's my recording. It's playing back for some reason.
Yeah, that's it now. Thank you all so much. We have two more people who are supposed to join in. I think as soon as they join, we can begin. I see everybody is here, and there are some house rules we'd like to start off with, which Venkatesh will start with. Shall we begin, and whoever joins in can join in the discussion, because I know that so many of us are here and everybody's time is so precious. So why don't we just begin? Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah, thank you. Fine. Sounds good.
Great. You can start off by telling why we started this, set the context a little bit.
Yes. So I am just a quick blurb about myself. I am a special educator and I have worked in inclusive education my entire career. In the US, I came back 5 years ago, and grading and they hold such a big hold on students' lives and families. And I just wanted to talk about nothing much seems to have changed as far as grading goes from my time regarding grades is pretty similar. And I was a student in India, and I was a student in the US, and I could see the difference in terms of how I felt about grades in India versus the grades in US. And so I just wanted to have a conversation about assessment and grading within the Indian ecosystem, to see if things really are the same, because my viewpoint will be very different from the people who are part of the education ecosystem, which is why we want to do this. We have a student here with us, we have teachers, we have principals, and we have policymakers, and everybody in the ecosystem, parents, of course, or most of you are parents as well, I'm sure, and uh, and employers. So we sort of want to see where grades, how grades are viewed from everybody's lens, and that is the goal of starting this initiative. We would be talking to more people as the year goes on. This is our first panel, and I'm really happy that you all have agreed to share your viewpoints with us. Preethi, would you like to go over the house rules a little bit about muting and unmuting, and how they can share, how they can speak when they want to?
I know that Venkatesh is waiting to start next. So 3 organizations have come together and collaborated for understanding about grading and policies in India. And so the entire conceptualization of this was by Samam Vidya, and we have Ms. Padma Shastri and Ms. Supriya from Samam Vidya who have joined us today. And they do a lot of work with teachers in many schools across the country. And so they are speaking from that perspective. I'd like to ask Venkatesh to come in here and talk a little bit about Huga Life. Then I'll talk about Life, which is my organization, and then we go into the introduction of all the guests. Venkatesh? You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this amazing session. And the idea itself is a wonderful thing where we are here together to discuss about this. And I represent Huga Life, which is an organization dedicated to revive the intergenerational play. It's a specialist center for intergenerational play, which is nothing but a parent and a child can come together and then have good time and explore common interests. And so this is something which was there in our previous generation, which we are trying to revive at the center, which we have. And along with that, we work with schools at the 10th grade level for their life skills. And also we are play practitioners and play therapists. We work on the developmental stages of a child 0 to 8. So apart from that, primarily what Huga is, it's a Danish word for happiness, and a happy country like Denmark has made it. So we intend to give back the power of resilience back to the next generation. And how we do that is to ignite the fire and to unleash the child in every adult. So that's a little bit about us. And this project really is very passionate and very close to our heart. So that's how all the three organizations have come together. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing more from you all. And with regards to house rules, so Zoom meeting has a few hiccups in a way where if 2-3 people are unmuted or 2-3 people are talking together, the actual speaker's voice gets distorted. So in that way, we would want to have everybody on mute, and the control to mute and unmute will be with you all. And then later we can see how this goes. And at the same time, if you go to the participants, you have an option to raise hand. So where you can click on raise hand and then we would attend to you, we can chat. And there is another option called chat. There is an option to do private chat to all the participants over here, or you can send a message to everyone. So this is a little bit about that. And any other queries, you can just type it on the chat and then see how it goes. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to you, Preethi.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Venkatesh. My organization is LIFE, that's Leadership Initiative for Educators. We try and bring initiatives, different ones which are pertinent to the industry of education, to the spotlight. So we've spoken in the past few years, we've tried to bring the spotlight on to play and the importance of play in education. And then we have also tried to bring the spotlight onto STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Hopefully this is our next big project that we'd like to continue taking forward. It's an association of people who are leaders in the field of education, who come together, share resources, share ideas, and have a similar way forward, right? So that's what LIFE stands for. And I think very many of you I have met during this journey of having started LIFE. During this conversation today, we will be having some questions directed at some of the panelists, but it is an open discussion. So wherever you have some points to mention, please do raise your hand and just join into the conversation. So it has to be a candid, open discussion. I request all of you to just suspend politically correct answers and be honest in this discussion, because we are trying to trigger insight and information into the whole concept of grading. So a big request to all of you to please be as honest as possible. I'd like to introduce some of the panelists, and then I will pass it over to Ms. Padma for taking it forward with the other panelists. We are joined today by a very esteemed guest, Dr. M.K. Sridhar. So he has been a mentor and guide to me personally in my life, and he has inspired me to achieve whatever I have so far, and continues to inspire me. Dr. Sridhar has been a professor of management for most of his career. He has been in the field of tertiary education for over 35 years now, if I'm not wrong. He has been a member of, he was the member secretary for the Karnataka Knowledge Commission. He has been awarded the Rajyotsava Award, the President's Award, and so many more that I can't name in 1 hour. And presently he is serving on the National Education Policy Drafting Committee. And it's very refreshing to see his take on education, because I know that he is a visionary. So Dr. Sridhar, thank you so much for joining here. And I very fondly call him Chikkappa. So thank you so much for joining us here today evening. A quick note, Dr. Sridhar has another commitment. So he's here on the call with us till about 6:30. After that, he will have to, he will try and see if he can continue or he might have to exit. So once again, a very warm welcome. Priya is yet to join, I believe. I'm trying to see. We have Ms. Shanti Menon, who is the principal of Deens Academy. She has joined us on the call today. It is wonderful to have Ms. Shanti Menon with us. She is, again, a very progressive educator. I see the kind of vision she has for her school is fantastic. I know that she is very passionate about integrated learning space, and she follows that at her school. And she has been a big supporter to life in all our initiatives. So a very warm welcome, Ms. Shanti. We are yet to be joined by a couple more people. I am going to move on to the next one. We have with us Savitha Ravi, who is the founder director of Pramiti. A very warm welcome to Savitha, because she is, again, an exceptional educator and so progressive that sometimes it's hard to keep up with her. And her school is an alternative space which has created a beautiful nest for students, which has ensured that conceptual learning is fantastic at that school. And they have, I think, the child at the center of all learning that takes place. So it's a very refreshing view on education. And a warm welcome to you, Savitha. If not for her, my son would be presently homeschooled. So otherwise, I have found a space which is so beautiful that Savitha has created for all of us here. So a warm welcome to you, Savitha. We are joined by Mr. Louis Dias, who is the principal of the Greenwood High School at Bannerghatta Road. Again, a very senior educator, very passionate. My few conversations with him have left me thinking that Greenwood is really lucky to have him lead them from the front. And with a new space at Bannerghatta Road, he has made sure that it has become one of the hubs of education in the south of Bangalore. I have known him for a few years now, and I follow his work, and very fortunate to have made his acquaintance. A warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Preethi.
And we are also joined by Ishwarya Ahmed. She is the founder of Upturn Learning, a very close friend, a very dear friend, and sometimes even called my soul sister. So a warm welcome to Ishwarya. She has been in the field of learning and development, has worked with many corporates for over 17 years now. And now a few years ago, she founded Upturn Learning, which works with the parenting community. And it's all about building the community of parents and educators. One of their programs is called Digital Detox, and that's something that they are really passionate about, to ensure that children have a space and they are able to detox digitally. So a very warm welcome, Ishwarya. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Preethi. Pleasure.
We are also joined by Sheetal Jethy. She is the founder of Chalk, which is a group of teacher training institutes. Again, Sheetal has been a very progressive educator. I would say that I've known her since the time that she was with other chains of preschools, and she's working. She's made sure that she has grown the preschool chains into quality chains. I would say that she has contributed to ensuring quality at many of these institutions. She Incidentally, when I spoke to her earlier today, and this was something I didn't know before I invited her, she has done a lot of research on grading policies in India. And so it will be very nice to hear her take on the grading policies that are existing in India and how they affect the different kinds of learners that we have. Sheetal is also the parent of a child with special needs, and I'm extremely thrilled with the work that she does with her own child. And she leads a support group for moms who are also having children with special needs. And that's a large part of who she is. So a very warm welcome to you, Sheetal, as well.
Thank you, Preethi.
I now request Ms. Padma to introduce the rest of the speakers.
We are still, hello. Oh, yes. Thank you, Preethi. We are still waiting on a couple of people on this slide to join us. Right now, I would like to introduce Purva Watwe. She is a special educator who is working at Achieve right now. And she's been doing reading, remedial reading, and life skills at Achieve. She is passionate about education and she loves kids. And I can see her passion for working with kids. And that's why I would like her to have her input on this issue of how grading affects her students and her as a teacher. And the other person I would like to introduce is Preethi Padi. She is a teacher of younger kids at Kumarans, and she has a very spirited young son as well. She is very active and very involved in the field of education, and respect her, views on this point. And I would be interested in hearing what she has to say about how we grade younger kids and how it affects her as a parent as well as a teacher. And we're still waiting on the others to join us. So let us start, do you think?
Would you like to introduce Anish?
Yes, Anish. Venkatesh, would you introduce Anish to us?
Sure. So Anish is a 10th grader and had studied at Maitri Vidyaniketan, a school which we work. And he was part of the life skills session which we had run in the previous year. And is in the right position right now in his life where he's graduating out of 10th grade. And as you know, grades matter at this time. And I thought it's the right time to talk about and invite him over. Welcome, Anish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
But he doesn't look like a 10th grade. He looks like the undergraduate.
Great. We have everybody. Just a quick note here. This particular session, we are live streaming it to YouTube, where it's a private channel. Nobody is able to view it. Only after we finish the session, we will edit it and post it on social media with all your consent, right? So just wanted to make sure that you're all aware that it is being recorded, right? Ms. Padma, please take it away.
Okay. So before we begin, I just wanted to introduce two terms and the way I use those terms so that we are all on the same page before we begin. The couple of the terms that will keep coming up during the session is education and learning. And what do I mean by education? And I don't know if there is a uniform definition of education that has been encoded in some education code, but the way I use it is this, and you can tell me if that is something that you agree with. So I define education as any learning that takes us towards independence, college, or career. And I define learning as I use a B.F. Skinner's definition for learning, which is an intervention that results in change in behavior. And so that the evidence of learning is shown in behavior change. We keep joking. I, at some point, way in the past, was an engineer for about 5 minutes. And then I went all around, and here I am as an educator. So when I did my engineering, if I needed to fix a leak in my faucet, I needed a plumber who had passed 10th grade. And here I was an engineer who had taken a course in fluid mechanics, etc., etc. So what is this disconnect about? And so when we say learning, if that learning does not translate into behavior change, where I can actually change a leaky faucet and fix it, it's not really learning as such. So that is my definition of learning. Do you have any comments about these two definitions as I use them? Anybody wants to get started? Like, if you wish to, you can raise your hand if you wish, or if you agree, then we can move on. Okay. In that case, let us move on to the
Yes, I think.
slide. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to add on, education could also be building of character. I think that was a critical link that was missed in your definition of education.
Okay, okay. Building of character.
Character.
Okay, yes. Because I have used it from the viewpoint of B.F. Skinner, who is a behaviorist.
Okay.
And yes, perfectly makes sense. Any other comments?
I also feel, education is something which brings out the potential in everybody.
Brings out the
Really.
potential in everybody.
Everybody has something or other.
Yes.
Whether it brings it out.
Okay, character build. Yes. Anything about learning, the definition of learning? If not, we can move on to the next slide.
Miss Savitha has a point.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Education and learning are interdependent. I mean, without learning, there's no education, and without education, there is no learning.
Mm-hmm.
And education is being able to live your life consciously, aware of how your living, your decisions affect the others, affect the environment around you, and affect people around you. So I think education is about becoming aware of one's actions and being able to understand how important our decisions, our actions are in terms of living in harmony with others.
Okay. Is there any formal definition for these two terms in some education code?
I actually am very, very against formalities. So anything formal doesn't really gel with me. So this is something that I have kind of, so whenever I read Vivekananda or Tagore, I mean, the entire idea of education and learning has been to be conscious of what my actions are. If you're educated, you must know. And today's scenario is a complete, a very living example of how our actions have caused harm to us in many ways. So, I think education, if we were really using our education and learning, we would all be able to live in harmony, and that is what education can do to us. Be more civilized, be more sensitive.
Yeah. I have a comment here from that says unlearning is as important as learning in today's world. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that is very important. Now move on to the next question. Next point. Venkatesh, could you put the slide up for just a second? Purpose of a school education. So what would be the purpose of schooling after 8 years of schooling, after 8 years in our sphere of influence? Where should our students be and what should they be ready for and capable of? Dr. Sridhar, if you could start us off on, yes. If you could start us off on this, that would be awesome.
I think basically when we talk about the purpose of school education, I think that is the important phase of life of a child, which has got, developmental aspects. For example, all of us know that there is a lifespan for a child. As soon as the child takes birth, and even before the child takes birth, even before conceivement, the process of education starts. Even before conceivement, and during the process, and after the process. So therefore, we also have scientific and other evidence that normally the child, as and when it completes few years, there will be a particular development. whether it is motor skills, whether it is cognitive skills, whether it is, all kinds of things. But generally it is said, by the time the child reaches 6 years of age, 85% of the development of the brain would have taken place. It may vary, the range, maybe 80, 78, things like that. Second thing is also the literacy skills and numeracy skills. They're the two very important things that will contribute to your development. So what I feel, the purpose of school education is to lay a very, very firm foundation for the development of the child in the initial years and subsequently. How the personality happens, how you explore it, how you unfold it. Later on you are only following it up, that's all. Up to the age of 6, 85% of the brain development happens. So how do you safeguard that to start with and to follow it up subsequently? This is what I personally feel.
Thank you. Preethi, are you trying to say something? You're muted.
Sorry, I unmuted myself. Probably when we say school education, I think Dr. Sridhar spoke about the importance of the preschool education. Maybe it's for everybody here that when we are referring to school education, it is up to 10th grade. And maybe when we talk about assessments, it goes on even into secondary and tertiary levels of education also. So probably you wanted to mention about the purpose of school education being at the end of, say, 8th grade or 10th grade. What do we want the children to be ready for?
What I meant was, primarily, let me clarify. First, it has to lay a foundation for the original personality of the child.
Yes.
The foundation. Then the remaining part, whatever number of years you are talking about school education, that has to follow it up and strengthen and contribute. That's what I mean.
I would at this point also like to ask a student. I believe, I thought I saw Prajwal who joined. Anish, as a student, and Prajwal has joined us. Prajwal is a college student who's finished his, who's in second year or third year of engineering, I believe. So from the students, I would like to hear, at the end of school, were you where you thought you would be? Did you get what you thought you wanted from school?
Yeah, I think.
Anish, go for it.
Hello, everyone.
Prajwal is okay. Yes.
I think, yeah, definitely. I did get what I want. Could I get a more clarity on that question?
It is just a question of, at the end of 8 years of schooling, where do we want our students to be? What do we expect that they would know? And I'm asking the students here, do you think did you think you got what you wanted from school in order to successfully move forward?
I was in an ICSE school, and as per ICSE syllabus, we had a lot of things and a lot of topics that were covered back in school before we entered 11th and 12th. So from my view, when I entered 11th and 12th, I had a lot of topics that were already covered before in school. So I think that made it really easy for me to understand PU and get through it, because
okay. So
yeah.
That's good. What about you, Anish?
Yes, by the end of 8th standard, I feel that I had what I wanted actually, but was not very happy with school because I couldn't understand some of the things. And it was only when I come to 9th and 10th standard, I started understanding much better. And that made me, like 10th was my favorite. That was when I learned a lot of things, explored new things, and understood the real meaning of schooling and importance of it.
So you both were bound for college and you felt ready for college. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's accurate. I'm
Okay.
ready for college.
Okay. I saw a raised hand. I'm sorry. I was just scrolling through the screen and I saw somebody's hand
That was
raised.
me. I'm sorry. I just butted in.
Oh,
So we've been discussing
oh,
academics. I'm sorry. Is it okay for me to
yeah,
talk at this point?
absolutely.
Yeah. We're talking academics when we're talking to both the children.
Yes.
I think schooling has a lot more to offer than just academics. Because academics can be done even as homeschooling. Like Preethi said, her child could have been studying at home if she hadn't found a school like Savitha's. So there's something much more that a school offers than just academics. The whole ability to be able to be part of a huge social setup. So team building, problem solving, all of it comes into building skills in a child. And this forms a basis for the child's character, which I'm going back to, and his being, so that when he steps out into college or anything further than school, he's already partially trained towards it. The school milieu really does give them a lot more than just academics, therefore.
We have 3 more hands raised, Miss Savitha. Is it okay, Padma ma'am?
Yes, absolutely. The whole point of sharing
so
ideas.
Completely agree to what Shanti just mentioned. I want to just give a little bit of, when I was in school, 8th standard or even 9th standard, I was completely confused as to why I was being taught things that I was not at all interested in. And when I was in grade 5, I wanted to become the Prime Minister of the country. And I was wondering why I'm not given more, and I expressed that to my teacher and she just laughed it off. I was wondering why I was not given more sessions on history. So I was forced to do more sessions on the most important subjects were math and science. Not at all thinking what would be useful to me. And this continued throughout my education. And till today, I have not understood why I learned what I learned. But then, as a teacher today, I really wished I had paid more attention to my science teachers at that point of time, because then I could have taken science also for my children today. So that's all it is. But then I think schooling is much more than just, teaching history, civics, geography, mathematics, and science. It is about, again, what is it that I'm going to do with all of this information? And today, like what Shanti mentioned, one can sit at home and just everything is in that small box, parceled completely beautifully, and so much of information is available. Now, what do I do with that information is what the school should actually be talking about, and also be able to allow children to become more self-reliant, and also understand how to use all of this information to help each other and be in the world.
That's awesome. Yes.
In fact, adding on, I think, I don't know, becoming a prime minister was like probably a common thing. Maybe I also wanted to become a prime minister, and I was really interested onto learning civics that point of time, and understanding what parliament does, how it functions. But honestly, apart from one chance of a debate or an extempo round where I was asked that, what do you want to become in life? Apart from that one day, I was never asked in my whole career that, what do you want to become? And neither was anybody ready to nurture that whole concept of my interest into something, into going into politics, or maybe going into becoming or pursuing my dream of and eventually what happens is, your parents decide the career for you, and you tend to believe that yes, you have got everything from the school that you needed. So I don't know, that probably it was a complete perception which was absolutely built around, or it is usually built around a child, and the whole thinking process is diverted from the parental perspective towards what they want in life.
I'd like to draw the conversation back to what the purpose of school education is. So I know a lot of students here, so.
Let's close this particular question with Dr. Sridhar. He has his hand up. Can you unmute yourself? Sir?
Yeah, I need to leave now, so that's why I would like to only say one point, because you're all wonderfully, I'm extremely missing something great, spending more time with all of you, but I have some constraints. But only thing what I would like to leave behind and say is, all of you may be aware that India is in for a national education policy, and being a person part of that, let me assure you that the entire issue of assessment has been addressed very much in that policy. And what we have said is, from rote learning and the very fixed way of grading, etc., we need to go towards, one is rote, the other one is the summative kind of assessment. All put together, you try to judge somebody at some point of time. We want to get into formative assessment on one hand, and also trying to incorporate the critical skills like critical thinking, analysis, and things like that. So that's what we have a whole lot of one particular chapter, 4.9. It is a policy point number 4.9 in the page number 111 in the original policy document. The entire thing is discussed. So you can have a look at that. But what I would like to say is, the policy is going to happen the next few weeks, possibly, once the lockdown is lifted. Maybe then I think the broad principles will be laid. And if we can work backwards, how do we develop that kind of system at our level, at the individual level, at the institution level, and at the system level? I think that will be a good, it's an opportunity for all of us. All of that, what we are talking, when there is a policy happening, it's a right opportunity to hit and try to do what best can be done. With this, I'd like to take leave from you. Thank you, Preethi and others, Padma and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us.
The policy that you have mentioned and look at the document, and maybe that will give us a little bit more in-depth understanding. And we would like to work closely with making sure that the implementation part also is as you have visioned it to be. So we'd like to work together on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
So we have 3 more hands raised for this. If we would go to them or continue.
Sure, let's keep it really short, because now we are really getting into the grading. This is kind of like the background setting for getting into the grading questions. So yes, Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, I think Dr. Sridhar put it very succinctly that with the new education policy and assessments taking a very front role in that, we really need to understand where we are on this. I'd like to give a little analogy, and it perhaps comes from the school background itself, because sometimes as a principal, we spend more time putting out fires in transport than worrying about education. And it's around that is transport for schools or is schools for transport? And I think a similar question can be asked about assessment and grading. Is the school running for grading, or is it the other way around? And I think if we are clear about this, a lot of perspective takes place, and we know where we are heading. I think Dr. Sridhar's comments were absolutely spot on.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Preethi, you wanted to add something?
Myself, right? Preethi is here. Okay. Yes, Padma.
Yes.
Actually, I just want to continue a little bit of Sridhar sir's staying, being a kindergarten teacher, I have seen many schools also grade for the kindergarten. And whereas he was mentioning that this is the age when we look into consolidating the child's learning, like the child should come here to prepare himself, prepare the foundation. So somewhere I feel most of our schools have also considered kindergarten into the grading system. So somewhere I'm not very convinced about this factor, and I feel this period should be allowed smoothly, at least till 8, because it by 6 to 8 the child would have developed language by more gross motor skills. He is ready. I think we should consider looking into refining his foundation, rather than coming into a judgment. That's what I feel. So,
actually, we are going to have a discussion point on preschool grading later, a little bit later.
Okay.
In this evening. So we will talk about it more in depth. It's a very important point that you have brought up. And I believe at this point as well, she's my teacher, Nehru Fulbright scholar, and currently in Canada, and she's joined us from Canada. And we are just going to move into the next question. And do you want to show this on the screen, Venkatesh? So we are going to start starting with assessment. A scenario. This is a kid who has recently come into an English medium school, and he has an attention disorder, let us say, and he fails a science test. So what are we going to conclude? Does that indicate that the student has not understood science, that the student could not read the test because he's come to English medium recently, that the student couldn't sustain attention because he has some attention issues, or that the student couldn't write fast or well enough? What is the conclusion we can come to when a kid fails a science test? And that's the only data point we have at that point. And we can move to the next section. Venkatesh, we can move to the next section on this. Yes. So did the test measure science knowledge, reading skill, sitting tolerance, time management, writing skills, or memory? So, Dr. Ramanathan, how should we approach this? Venkatesh, you can take off the slide. I think she is muted. Is she muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. When we think about what, if we're talking about ADD, do we know what ADD is? Does teacher know that? It's not that you can't test an ADD student. There are different factors that play into that, like you said, about being able to sit, being able to read. I'm sorry I wasn't in earlier, connectivity problems. But the other factor that we need to look at also is things like time of day. An assessment like this is only a snapshot. The ADD student at that point, in those 45 or 90 minutes, may have an episode, may have a certain way of looking at how that time is spent. So when we consider that this kind of test is only a snapshot, it doesn't necessarily mean that the child doesn't know science or child cannot read or that the child doesn't know how to write.
Yes.
It may be that the weather was bad. So there are circumstantial factors too that need to be built into it. So it is what you've listed, but there may also be other factors that haven't been listed. So no, when we look at what the purpose of testing is, which again is something that we need to take into consideration for interpreting any test result. I mean, is it to place the grade in a child? Is it an evaluative test? Is it an assessment test? Is it a test for the child to know where to go with it? Is it for the teacher to know what to reteach? So I think we need to look at not just what is being tested. When we look at an English medium, it's not just the science which is going to be a problem. It is the language which is going to be a problem. But it's also going to depend on where the test is being held, for instance. I mean, if this student is in a class with 45 other students as against a cubicle,
yes,
that may make a difference too.
Yes.
So for me to take the test out of that context and make an assessment of the student's capacities may not give the true picture of what that child is able to do.
Because that is what pretty much the report card does. There's a number against science, and that's all the data we usually get. Geeta Sundar is a classroom teacher. So Geeta, have you faced a scenario like this, where you have a student and you have tested that student and you get some data, and then you wonder what it is that you measured? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you. 1 second, because I'm trying to connect it with computer laptop. It's okay. Okay.
Connectivity issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you saw the scenario, right? There's a student who has failed a science
that's
test.
true. There are many cases. Yeah. I've seen the scenario. Yeah.
Does it happen in your class?
There are many students who are suffering more like this because we didn't. Yeah, definitely. Many a time, because children comes from various backgrounds. Not only the language, there are many problems they are facing, where we need to handhold them instead of blaming them that they cannot understand, they are not able to read, they couldn't write. We need to handhold them. That's what we used to take children on that way.
Okay. So you
that
agree
doesn't mean that the child do not remember. Yeah,
you agree.
That's true, because children, they suffer. Those who are coming from other backgrounds, they don't know. Initially, they need time. We need to give them that time, that cushion time where the children need to adapt with the situation, the people. There are a lot more for a child to cope with. We need to give that kind of time to them.
So I believe Shanti Menon has her hand up. Would you like to add? Does this child get the time like Geeta was mentioning in class?
Thank you. So essentially, I think we are assessing the wrong thing for this child. The child has transferred into an English medium school and doesn't have a background. I think that's what we need to fix first. And so we don't have to necessarily have the same objective for assessment for every child in a class. This particular child needs completely different objectives for assessment in the initial years, like the teacher, Ms. Geeta, just said. He needs a different kind. His needs are very different from the rest of the classroom. So while we're even assessing him on science, his requirements are to first learn the language. to get into the classroom, to be able to comfortably settle into the peer group. And I think that should be the focus of the class, and the assessment should be on that. Science can always be taught much later.
So does this happen in an actual classroom though? How practical is it?
Very often. But it also requires that kind of sensitivity from not just the teacher, but also from the school. So when you are admitting a child of that kind, you're very sensitive to the fact that this child's requirements are very different from what is going to be in the classroom. So at least in our case, what we do at Deens is that children who come from different backgrounds, I personally meet every single child of every 4 campuses of mine. I run 4 campuses. I have over 4,500 children that I'm dealing with. But you're looking at the child's requirement when you take the child in, and there's a definite note which goes into every person under that. So starting from the headmistress to the teacher, the section head, all of them get to know what the priority with this child is until the child has got, settled into the whole system. So assessment of science is the last of our priority. The priority is certainly getting the child comfortable, getting the child to learn the language and become one in the classroom. I think that is the first form of assessment that we do. And here assessment, I don't know if I'm crossing lines here now, but assessment does not need to be in terms of marks. For the first few months, this child possibly doesn't need any kind of marks to be assigned to him. And today in India, we still assess in terms of marks or grades. Very rightly, like Ms. Preethi, the kindergarten teacher said, assessment in kindergarten. I have a view on that. We'll come to it later. But this particular child needs a different kind of objective in his existence in that school. And the objective is not science, but the objective is learning the language, sitting tolerance, learning to get into the processes that a classroom involves. Those are the kind of things that we will probably assess them on. And I'm sure in 6 months' time, the child understands and starts settling in because somebody is hand-holding him through this process.
Yeah, thank you. Sheetal, you have a hand up. Would you like to add?
Yeah, being a mother of a special needs child, obviously I do understand that, how it is taken up. Now, honestly, now at this point of time when a child is it's very new to an environment, the child needs to be, obviously Shanti ma'am has already covered up a lot of points into it. So the child definitely needs to be comfortable into the environment first. The teacher needs to understand individual need of the child rather than giving a test paper and assessing the child that whether the child understands science or not. The child understanding the environment, understanding the classroom, understanding sitting, understanding friends, that's much more important to that child at that point of time, rather than assessing the child where the teacher doesn't even know the child that what knowledge level or what level of intelligence the child is in. So I don't think judging a child at that point of time would make any sense.
Yes, thank you. So we will move on to the next question, which comes to what we were already starting our discussion on a little bit, the purpose of testing and data collection. So what are all the different kinds of assessments and tests that are performed in schools and colleges from elementary through tertiary? And why do you test? What is the purpose of testing? And what kinds of other data do we collect other than marks? Do we think it is important to invest time in collecting and understanding this data? Venkatesh, yes, thank you for sharing that slide. So these are the questions that we want to sort of spend a few minutes on. If we can keep our answers within under 2 minutes, then we can have a couple of different viewpoints on this. Dr. Ramanathan, your mute button, I think, should be there.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Somebody mentioned diagnostic testing earlier. I think when we talk about testing, we essentially talk about summative testing. We don't talk, and we definitely don't talk about formative. Most of the time in a school, we don't do diagnostic testing because that needs to be done by the teacher, usually to understand what needs to be done next and why something wasn't understood. And I'm talking about the US schools, not just Indian schools. But and diagnostic testing, if it's going to be formalized, needs to have the teacher needs to have a much clearer understanding of what should be taught and why it should be taught and how it is learned. Using a paper pencil test is very different, and we get very different results as when we get performance, for instance. So when we do a performance, what are we testing for? So the mode of testing makes it difficult sometimes to do a diagnosis, because then you have interference and you have data that you really don't know how to interpret. The summative testing is easier in a way because it's more traditionally done. Formative testing becomes more difficult than summative because it does need to, it takes into consideration what students know, not merely what they don't. And most of the time with summative testing, we are taking points away rather than giving points. It's a negative marking system that we adopt, not a positive one. And then that is always setting the student up for failure. It is, I'm giving you points for what I'm taking points away for what you don't know and what you get wrong, rather than identifying what the student knows. So I think if we are really going to look at the purpose of testing, which should be what students know, we need to begin with formative testing. We need to begin with diagnostic testing to see what and why they haven't understood. And summative testing shouldn't be high stakes as it is now, nor should it be and in Indian schools, when we do monthly tests and weekly tests, and you have students sitting up and not really, this happens in the US where we have the annual tests in the 3rd grade, for instance, and students they're not happy with it and they don't perform very well.
Yes.
So I think given those 3 kinds of tests and given the modes that we use, which is primarily written paper and pencil, none of that shows what students know. Yes. So if we're looking at a purpose, we need to begin there.
Yes, thank you. Purva, Watwe, you have your hand up. Would you like to add to that?
May not add to that. She is speaking at a level which I will not reach. I'll just like to, yes. So the data collection, the purpose of testing is for evaluation. According to me, evaluation is testing the efficacy of instruction. So I, as a teacher, also am evaluated. If you take the scenario for the science student, if I was his teacher, I also failed. I failed in understanding that there could be another way of testing him or her. I could have given a science experiment. The goal for language is for me as a teacher, not for the child. He could have demonstrated the science experiment and got marks. So the mode of testing, gathering information is very important. So the process is as important as the output. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Purva. That was nice. Preethi, Vikram wants to say something.
Just coming here in terms of what are the different kinds of assessments. Speaking on behalf of Savitha, I don't know if she remembers this. When my son was in 1st grade, they wanted to test the math skills of all the children. And so one of the assessments that they used was to get children to play, to role play. And so my son had to be the shopkeeper, and he had to sell vegetables and other grocery items, which is a great skill to have now, today in COVID. But anyway, and that tested how well he could add and subtract, and he could give back the change. And so his math assessment was based on that. I remember getting feedback about that, about his math skills based on that activity. So that was a very different form of assessment that I had come across, and I'm really thankful to
her
Savitha
hand is
for that.
up, so I'm going to call on her. Savitha, would you like to take it up now?
Yeah, so the point for me is very simple. Why do we have only written assessments? And even the oral assessments that we do are so, I'm sorry to use this word, but so stupid. We ask them to recite a poem, learn a poem by heart, and then recite. How does it even matter whether the child remembers every line of the poem if the child has understood the poem? In fact, thanks Preethi for bringing this up. But in Pramiti, what we do is the final exam is nothing but a final project. And the project is not something that, it's not called a project, it's called exposition. And the children basically are putting together, the final exam is nothing but an exposure. Children are putting together all the experiences that they have had through the year and presenting it to parents, to guests, to the teachers, and to everybody else who is around. And that clearly assesses what they have been interested in, what they have understood, what have we as teachers failed to get them interested in. Okay, so I would only use the word fail for teachers and definitely not for the children, because at every point of time when we get back home, instead of saying that, oh, this child did badly, this child has not got good grades, I can always look into what I have done, retrospect every day. How have I reached out to every child? That is what I have to say about assessments. And I think the entire assessment system needs a makeover. I don't know about the other countries. Of course, I think even in when I lived in the US, it was the same system that was followed.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just going to go to the next scenario now. So we're moving on to report cards. So a student to be a consistently strong 85%er, this student, this kid is a consistent 85%er, a B grade or an A grade or something like that, suddenly has 59%. So what are you going to think? Your first instinct that this kid, something happened over the past term, just went poof, or do you know instinctively that the report card, there's something wrong with it? So my question is, if it is that easy to overrule report card data just with your gut feeling, what exactly is the utility of the report card? Why do we value it so much? Anybody wants to come in from a parent lens with this? As a parent, your kid comes home with a report card. What is your gut reaction to the marks? Yes, Ishwarya, Ahmed, please, your hand is up.
Yeah, hi. My answer is sort of combined for the last two questions and the current case that you've just brought up. Very interesting thoughts by every single person I was just nodding all the way, when I think Sheetal was talking and when Dr. Ramanathan was talking, I was just nodding all the way. So couple of things. I think one thing I want to say, and I think Sheetal would be able to understand, I'm a mother of a special needs child and a neurotypical child. So I get to see two worlds, so to say. And I think I've transitioned from the neurotypical world into the special needs world when I had my second child. It's so unfortunate that neurotypical children love to be treated like special needs children. You know what I mean? They like play-based assessments. They love occupational therapy. My daughter loves every single thing that my son does. He's a special needs child, but it's so unfortunate. A neurotypical child does not get such a beautiful assessment like a special needs child. My son gets a preferential assessment, a play-based assessment. He gets to, do so many fun things. So my point is, it's so sad that somewhere in the space of education, the neurotypical children are not treated specially. You get my point? So it's so sad that they crave for play-based assessment. They want to do a gamified simulation. They want to do pretend play. They want to do role play. And here we are saying, please narrate, please go ahead and do this. Please explain, describe, say it in a few words. These are the words she gets. So my point is, but again, coming back to my gut feel about this whole report card scenario, it is also the culture. I think that there are three different three C's I want to talk about as a pillar to all these discussions. We are not living in a world where content is king. We're living in a world where context is king. So every single thing about education should be about context going forward. And the second most important thing, and again to the report card question, is the culture. What has been fed into, what is culture? I think one of the best lines I've ever heard is, culture is what most of your people are doing most of the time. Right? So as a culture, if most of us most of the time are looking at a report card to assess this person, what do? When we grow up later, it's pretty much the same thing, right? We end up gauging people by their LinkedIn profiles, don't we? How many of us really know a person more than the LinkedIn profile sometimes, right? So it's the culture. We do that most of the time. So it's us. So if I react to or respond to the report card in a certain way, that's the system tomorrow. But so I think it has to do with content, context, and culture, even put together. And the second important point is, let's treat neurotypical children like special needs children. They love it. So
Thank you.
that's my second input.
I had a point, Padma ma'am, if I can jump in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so working with special needs has always been something close to my heart when I look at the progress, the inch or the micro progression what the child makes through the facilitation, and then going according to the speed and the need of the child, and designing the curriculum. And you should see the glitter in the eyes of the parents. And then I often wonder, when I look at the neurotypical children, when I go to the class 10th grade and 80 kids and 40 there, and then I hear a lot of friends of mine who say, I hear that it's always a comparison ball game. I always feel that, was it a sin that this child is born neurotypically? That he is subjected to all these comparison and all these things. So it's always like, that really sparked this thing with me, Ishwarya, that why do we look at things the moment you're a neurotypical, you entrust everything. Sometimes your dreams are unfulfilled, you dump it on them and live through them. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
I'm a special educator. So I always say, what works with a child with special needs works great with everybody. So, I would use that with everybody, any strategy that I come up with. I also, for this particular question, want to talk to the students. If you take a report card like this home, how do your parents react? Anish, Prajwal.
So yeah, when I take my report cards home, my parents give me a positive reply. There is nothing like, why have you done this? They just say, you've done good, just do better, try doing better next time. Stay good to teachers, and that's all. Concentrate on classes, be friendly to teachers, and get all your doubts cleared with them.
Okay. Have you ever had this kind of an anomaly where you suddenly, atypically did something that was not showing your actual marks?
No,
your potential. It hasn't happened.
No, it has happened in the other field, actually, like in the field of music education. Okay, so I was a good scorer and suddenly I got less marks. They just said, why, what happened suddenly? That's it. They said, okay, go on, carry on, keep practicing, do well next time. That's what you can do.
And what about Prajwal?
I've had cases where I had a test and then in computer science and I scored 2 marks, and then the next week I scored 98. So I think when you take a marks card home, you're just seeing what marks you get at that point of time, just a day before exam or something like that. What your studies then doesn't mean that, because most of it is just memorization and how you present the topic with terms and stuff. You don't really understand if you've actually grasped the concept or not. So if you know the terms and if you can memorize them or whatever, and how well you present it on the day of the exam, I think that's what the marks card shows. Doesn't really mean if I've understood the topic or not.
Like Dr. Ramanathan was saying, it's a snapshot of that particular time and space. Yeah.
So if that day was bad, then the paper is bad.
Okay. So then we move on to post-assessment analysis. So you have all these marks. This is, I think, mostly for teachers. What happens after testing? What do you do with the data? What kind of data analysis happens after testing at classroom level and at school level? And how do teachers use test results? What do you use it for? And what information do you get from the scores? Do teachers use students' test results for professional development purposes? For example, do you see test results as evidence of a teaching strategy that worked well or didn't work? And do you feel this data could be fed back into the system to help bring about an attitudinal shift regarding grades and influence conversations with students? So this is about what happens after testing at a classroom or at a school. So this would be for teachers and principals, what generally happens.
Can I lead on this?
Yes, absolutely, please.
And I'm talking the US scenario now, and we've had test data come out of our ears. We have lots of data points. We have them usually at the grade level, class level, rather than at the individual level, because the data does not identify students, it identifies patterns. Sometimes it's useful to know what the class has learned or not learned, and what the teacher has been successful. But understanding and analyzing and interpreting data is a very specialized task, requires a special set of knowledge, and most of us are not statisticians. Data are not necessarily presented in ways that are digestible to teachers. So in the US too, you have, after a testing period, you have a grade level meeting or a faculty meeting that's called, and the school data and the class level data are presented. But for any teacher to use that data usually requires someone who's an analyst to sit down and walk a teacher through that data to say, this is what it means. This is what you're looking at. And this is what you don't, what you need to be doing next. So giving teachers data does not mean the teachers can use that data. Teachers need to be helped to use that data. And it's difficult to find people who can do that kind of interpretation. Yeah. And difficult for teachers to sit down and try to understand how that understanding of what's been taught and learned should be interpreted, digested, and used going forward. So it's a very different, that teachers aren't taught. Principals, I don't know really, most of the time in India that I've seen, don't know how to use data. They have large data sets, but using them is a very different matter altogether.
Yes, there is a hand up. Purva, Watwe, would you like to say something?
Sure. What happens in our school at Achieve, before the PTM, for the report card or for the scores that are shared with the parent, the team of teachers sit together. If the deviation is very, very evident, then they work on the team. They understand why the child has scored differently this time, and remediation starts immediately. And they do tell the parents that this child needs help and we would like you to be part of the resource room, or if you can train him at school, after school elsewhere, or with the parent.
So but this is case by case basis.
If the deviation is very different, yes, case by case. But the pattern, like ma'am said, the pattern is seen. So they sit and work at every child's report, scores are checked. And each teacher says, okay, he's doing well in Sanskrit, but then why has he fared poorly in science? Then the strategies are shared, and they are shared with the parent also. The coordinator and the team of teachers sit together and discuss every child.
Right.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I being part of this conversation has been fascinating because the passion that comes from everyone, whether it's a student or a parent, and of course the teachers here, is absolutely stunning. And as a principal, I am deeply humbled because the very last portion is probably the most difficult. How do we take this and actually implement it? I wish I had the answers. To be quite honest, I think Purva also did put a finger in it. Yes, we sit down with parents. Yes, we discuss that. But I think a lot of it is a bit of a hit and a miss. I think there could be something far more scientific and more objective to be able to get an answer that says, this is the direction that I can move in to solve this child's problem. That's what I'd like to add.
Thank you. Savitha, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, there is this space which we had, me and my husband had encountered during our quest about assessment. So it's called Educational Initiative, and they have done a lot of work in terms of understanding how to interpret data that they get from children's assessment. So they are developing tools. I mean, they've still not done anything major there. But what I would like to add is it is important that in every teacher's training that is available, see, I've done the Montessori training, I've done the traditional Indian BA, I have not done the BN. But the CIPDL, the IGCSE training and all of that, the Cambridge training, none of them really talk about interpretation of data that is received from any assessment. You know, I mean, as a teacher, we are not even supposed to probably know that according to all these institutes that carry out the training. So what is the point in having this assessment? If we don't know how to interpret what is the data that we are getting from the assessment. So I would really, there will be a shift. There will be a shift only if these things are plugged into the teacher's training, rather than just focusing on how to get the children to get marks. That is not the important factor. It is more important to understand why the children are faring in the way they are faring. So a simple thing that I would like to also urge principals and teachers to do is talk to the children, right? I mean, talk to the learners. So in our class, we had a scenario where all the children have done really to use the cliche term, badly in Hindi. So we went and spoke to the children. They are just second graders, okay? I mean, who probably gave all blank papers, blank books when the teacher decided to assess them out of her own will. So they said that we just cannot sit in her class because it's really boring. She doesn't play games with us. She doesn't make it interesting. We don't understand what she says. First of all, we don't understand the language. So the assessment, the data is very much there. So the whole point is, what do you get from this data? You need to completely relook at the entire way you're teaching your children. So it is the way you take this data, and this is very simple data that I'm talking about, but there is so much of complex data that is available when you are assessing children. And that is something that we don't know. None of us know how to interpret the data. So that's where it is.
Thank you. So we have two speakers, and after that, we'll move on to the next topic. And we are sort of getting close to the end here. Geeta, Sundar, you wanted to add something, and then Supriya will close with Supriya's comments on this particular topic. Go ahead, Geeta.
Regarding this data, actually what we will do is we'll do along with the children the error analysis. See, in one subject, the child might have scored well, but the same child might have scored very less in the other two subjects. So what we do before publishing the data or before deciding that child has got less mark and any other comments, we do error analysis with the children. After completing every test with the children, we will do, and we will come to know whether the child has committed mistake or the teacher, whether the teacher needs to change the strategy or the child could not understand the concept. So
that's interesting.
By making that error analysis, definitely we'll do each and every test, and then we will find where the fault lies, whether with the child or with the teacher. If it is with the teacher, then the teacher need to change the strategy. If child has some problem, then we need to talk with the child. Why you were doing so well in all the other subjects? So what is the difficulty? What difficulties are you facing in this particular subject? So we will talk one-to-one, and then we will recover that child from that. So I just would like to add on like this. This is what we used to do in our school.
Thank you. Supriya, you want to close this particular topic?
Yes. So I think I can take from where Ms. Geeta Sundar left it. Assessment is like a feedback to teachers, saying that, where am I going wrong, or where am I falling short, or where I could do better for students. So all of us try to change our teaching and learning methodologies. But how many of us try to think about, I need to change my approach and behavior and perception towards a particular child? So I'm arriving at types of data that we collect. Do we collect perception data in Indian schools? We have demographic data, we have achievement data where we see, okay, children come from these demographic pockets or these kinds of families, single mother family or single parent, cultural background, we collect that. And we collect achievement data that says, oh, so-and-so child is above average, average, below average, or gifted. Other than that, how many of us collect perception data? This goes back to what you were saying, Ishwarya and Ravi were talking about. So perception data is how a child perceives the perception of his teacher about him or her. How am I viewed by my teacher? Am I viewed as I'm a capable child? I'm an able child? Am I a good child? And that does really play a role when a child is performing during your assessments. And how many of us work on that perception data?
That is very.
And yeah, following the work of Victoria Bernard, that's what she talks about. Perception data is so important, but most ignored. And we don't take feedback from that perception data of, was I being slightly biased, or was I stereotyping a child? Also, this brings us, Padma, to a Pygmalion test, Rosenthal test, that says a child performs better or worse depending on how the teacher views him or her. If Padma is my professor and she thinks and believes in me during the assessment that, yes, Supriya, you can do it. I know you'll crack this test. And I think that gives me a little bit of confidence to do the test better. And it is proven in Pygmalion test, Rosenthal test. So I do believe at some point education system has to work on collecting perception data and being mindful about it and being aware of it.
Yes, we are coming really close to the end, but I am going to call on the two people who have their hands up. If you can quickly give the add to it. Sheetal, you want to get started?
Yeah, so coming to this point, I just want one question to be raised, that does a child need to be good at all the subjects? I guess no, because sometimes before I just read a WhatsApp forward, which was very appropriate, that I have 8 different specialized teachers for 8 different subjects. So how can I be specialized in every subject? Now, obviously, coming to perception data, we need to also analyze that what the child is looking at, the child's interest. Hence, the data should be always child-centric. And if a child is really doing good at one subject, I think we should have the child to pursue his dreams or his interest level or inclination to be persuaded. I think that's my take.
Thank you. Yes. Shanti, Menon, would you add to that? Yes.
One of the things that I think data should also lead to is teacher development. So a lot of times when we are analyzing data, and again, it's a very rudimentary method of doing it. We're just comparing data of student performance and arriving at gut feeling of certain things not going right in certain classrooms. And therefore, of course, then the only way to follow up is watch the classes and then decide on what can be done to enhance the teacher's skills. So that's a very definite direction that data can lead us to. And that's very critical for a child's later learning too.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, we're getting a lot of different inputs here. We are going to have one last topic before we end today, which is preschool. If you can bring that slide up, please. Okay. So, what is
the preschool slide? Can I come in very
Yes.
quickly about data?
Yeah, sure.
On a lighter note, what we use data for, we all know. What we shouldn't use data for is publishing it anywhere, especially these big full-page ads which come about 10 standard results and then posting it on our notice boards. That's what we shouldn't be using data for. So anyway, moving on.
Important point. Thank you. Yes. So if we can get to the last preschool topic, what is your view of assessments and grading at preschool and early elementary grades? Do preschool kids and early elementary students need to be assessed for grading purposes? Are any other assessments needed for this age group? And at what cards justified? Above what grade level do you think homework and graded homework is reasonable? So I believe we have a couple of people who work with the younger kids. I know that Preethi works with the younger kids. Would you like to get started? We'll have like 2 or 3 inputs here and then we'll wrap it up.
Great. Having worked with younger children for the last 16, 17 years, I think one thing we've learned is that no 2 children are the same. So it makes no sense for us to give standardized testing especially in the early childhood level, right? So in our preschools, we observe children, and our entire assessments is about whether the child is reaching those milestones that are typical for that age group, rather than about whether the knowledge or the information, etc., is being understood and correctly received by that child. And so it's a lot of in-depth observations that happen, and not any form of grading that happens in our preschool. So, and I think it's children are not ready to be graded probably up to the age of about 8 minimum, I'm saying. I think up to the age of 8, we need to be teaching children to collaborate rather than compete, because the minute you get into grading, it's only becoming competitive. And so at the age when they're supposed to learn about collaboration, it's important that we don't get them to compete, and then then the collaboration is really dead, isn't it? So in our preschools, we follow the EYFS system, which is the early years framework from UK, and we analyze the child on 7 areas of development. And so each area, we observe the child during 3 terms, and each child is observed at least about 3-4 times in a month, and the teacher will make notes. Based on her notes, it's translated into the different statements we have in our observation scales, and those are then finally understood, and it's a continuous assessment. That means that a child is assessed on a continuum, observed on a continuum, and not necessarily at that age group. So his, say for example, the reading skill might be at 3 years, but his writing skill might be at 2.5 years. So the child is assessed on a continuum, and we ensure that we are challenging the child at where they are. So it's really summing up all the things that we've been discussing so far. So it has worked really well because we are able to showcase the learnings that have happened, and more importantly, understand what the child requires and understand the child much better. So that's what we do in the preschool. I mean, that's what I feel we should be doing in the preschool. Padma, you're muted.
Preethi, Padi, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Padma, here in India, there are two types of schools basically for preschools. One is the Montessori type of schools, and one is any kindergarten schools. And I see that the environment are very different. Although they all come together, join together in the first grade, that is one thing. But the assessment part is done a little different, I feel, in both the schools. Because in Montessori, it's more done through observations, because there are ready hands-on materials, and they only look like there is no particular day or such where you have a test or something like that. So the observation is throughout the year. So you note down the child's observation, and accordingly the graph how the child has improved upon or developed upon a certain skill. Okay, so coming to the other schools here, one is the children are large in number, say about 30 to 40, some schools. I'm talking about every school where they have kindergarten sections. The most minimum is 25 also. In the classroom type of schools, the movement is restricted, so they can't move on. So the teacher can observe based only on either language development or the numerical ability or the understanding, like following the instructions. Many time at UKG level, the blackboard teaching is done, whereas in Montessori it is a little restricted because they are more into working on the materials. Only for the transition and just to bridge to move to the next grade, they do blackboard teaching in Montessori towards the end. But in the classroom teaching of different types of schools, the blackboard is there. So here the gradation parts comes, you can't do it completely on the observation. So whatever is a written thing or developed based on that, the observation is done. And also they have a standard statements like whether the child is independent or the child can follow the instructions. Based on this, the gradation is done. Of course the report card is published, just it's more of it's kind of expressive. I mean, it's put into words, it's not graded as any marks or something and all. But what I have observed is the child who starts in the beginning without any of these skills will somehow be struggling to develop, and we are too early to grade them at that time. So here the child takes a time to develop. So these children, as they move on into later grades, you can see a tremendous change in them, how they are. So you can't completely judge just based on the skills which are still underdeveloped. So I feel allow the child, give the time to develop completely.
And
This
not
is too
grade
early.
right away.
Yeah.
Too early. Sheetal, Jethy, you want to add something?
Yeah. So the child right now needs development at its emotional quotient, its social quotient, and the most importantly, the play quotient. Play, 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 which is absolutely ignored in preschool levels. The most important things, or the most important, or the only one thing which the child should do at a preschooler level is to play. And believe me, they learn everything through play. there will be learning differences, and learning differences are good, believe me. Because if we do not have learning differences, then we are raising robots. So there has to be learning differences. Gradation at this point of time, at preschooler time, is just criminal. I'm sorry to use the word, but yeah, the kids should just be left to do unstructured play. In fact, I mean, they need to explore things by themselves, play, develop emotionally, socially, and have lots of fun at that point of time, specifically at preschooler grade.
So, but preschool kids do get our report card.
See, honestly, if you ask the gradation, I have been working into preschool industry from last 17 years. I have met parents who actually come and, they fight that why my child has got 2 stars instead of 3 stars. Last assessment cycle, she got 3 stars, and why this time only 2 stars? I was like, oh my God, really? Are we worried about 1 star at a preschooler level? So the more at this point of time, because there's a lot of Google aged parents who are there, the information which they find it on Google, and they come back with the questionnaire and the half of the knowledge, which actually bounces back on the child. So, burdening them with the grades at this point of time is actually not
right.
all advisable. Learning differences definitely should be there at this point of time, and in fact at all points of time. I'm talking about every point of time. I should have a learning difference from my husband should have a learning difference from his colleagues. I mean, everybody should have a learning difference, otherwise we are just robots. Robots.
Yes.
Sorry, I was supposed to leave, but I really want to say one last thing before leaving. I've been saying bye on the chat to all of you. But I couldn't agree more with Sheetal, and I'm heading back because, again, I had to head back for my son. I just want to say that if you should have a report card, then the criteria should be play, curiosity. It should be about this child yesterday versus this child today. Because in my house, we have a champion board for my daughter, especially during the lockdown. It says LIBA versus LIBA. So it shouldn't be competitive in nature. If you really insist on a report card, let it be this person yesterday versus today, instead of me versus you. And let the criteria be play and all kinds of things, the fine motor skills, the gross motor skills, their ability to be curious, every single thing that makes childhood beautiful. And one very important thing I'd like to add is a parents as teachers program, because for all the change that you want to make, the parent should be tuned in. And at the moment a parent thinks like a teacher, it makes a huge difference in the child's life. Today we have 2 parents staring at the phone, busy thinking about their next con call, their next Zoom call, their next webcam, their next whatever. So I think it's important to anchor parents as teachers and reset the criteria and make it yesterday versus today than me versus you. With that, I'm signing off to go back to my son, but I love this group and I love the interaction. I can't thank you enough, Preethi, for thinking of me to be part of this group. Thank you so much, Padma, lovely host. See you all. I love each one of the thoughts that came through.
Thank you for logging in. Thank you very much. We are just going to we are over time already, but I have 2 hands up. If you can quickly wrap up, then we can finish the session today. Savitha.
Yeah, for me, I completely agree with Sheetal. I think at that age, it's more important to, even if you're having even though we talk about Montessori being a very hands-on and a very material-based approach, there are also the kind of reports that are produced is she's mastered this, she's a beginner in this, there are tick marks given for all the presentations that are given. And I really do not understand why that is required. It's at the end of the day, and then you make something out of it. If she's not done cylinder blocks, she's done pink tower. Why didn't she do cylinder blocks? So there's again comparison, and there are doubts in the child. Maybe she doesn't like the look of the cylinder blocks. She likes the pink tower better. So we have to look at that. And Montessori never created these materials for the reason that for the way the report cards have been designed today. And I completely agree with the Ishwarya that observation, inquiry, the ability of the child to communicate what the child is thinking, the ability for the child to express his or her needs in a group is what we need to look at, and not about whether the child has completed cylinder blocks or pink tower or whatever, or writing ABC, for that matter. So I completely do not agree to grading system in any grade for that matter, but definitely not in preschool.
Thank you very much for all your thoughts. So we had a little bit more, but we are going to conclude at this point. We'll truncate the show and we will catch up later with more points. So today we talked about the guiding questions. Today was what was the purpose of testing and how do we use test results? And is the report card a useful tool? And are we assessing what we mean to assess? So these were the broad ideas that we talked about today. And we'd like to develop these further in future panels. And we want to get into grading policies. This will be in future sessions. Venkatesh, if you could go to the next slide for a second. Yes. So how do we do the policy and differentiation when it comes to grading and assessment? Is there a policy that you already have as a school or as a department or whatever? And how much latitude is there in implementing the policy? And what kind of differentiation and accommodation scaffolding happens? And how much, are there objections when it comes to pushing the boundaries of policy? And these are things that we will explore in future sessions. So can we come to the last slide now? So a quick check back here with all of you before we wrap up. Do you feel that this issue and these questions are worth investigating further? And what are the burning questions that we have missed and would you like to see included? And what suggestions do you have going forward? So if we can do a quick, round robin, then we'll wrap. You can remove the slide, Venkatesh, so that we can see the people now. Yes. Anybody wants to share any ideas for going forward? And if these questions are worth pursuing further. And which questions would you like to see going further?
Can I?
Savitha, yes.
Yeah, I have only one question that we need to, I would like to see being taken forward. And that is, what are we going to do about this? We all know that we are having this problem of assessment and grading, and we all agree in principle that the grading system that we have is not working. The report cards we are having is not working. But what is it that we as a community can do to make the change? Because, I have been in the education field for almost 22 years now, and every time we have been discussing this. But is there anyone we can go to? Can we all go as a group and tell them, look, we don't, as teachers, as educators, we don't believe in what you are forcing us to do, and we are not going to do this. Can we have something which will really change this? Because I don't see any change happening. It's the same thing over and over again. The
okay.
Sheetal,
Jethy, you had
Yeah, very similar thoughts to as that of Savitha, that is there an alternative to a grading system? And so is there a feedback system which we can just give it across to the parents, or maybe a mentorship program rather than a grading system? So what are the different alternatives rather than just judging a child for what he is doing at that point of time, or completely giving the entire blame onto the child that yes, you didn't do well? Is there a parameter that the schools can take it over and understand the teachers, what kind of training they need, what kind of mentorship program can be given across to the teachers in with limited number of children, or a gurukulam system kind of thing, where a complete system was dependent on the guru, and the students never had a CGPA or a GPA or a SGPA, rather than they were known through their teachers. So I've been watching Mahabharata right now. So whenever Arjun introduces himself, it's like Dron Shishya Arjun. So can there be some system where great teachers make great students kind of thing, rather than knowing ourselves by CGPA and GPA and all those kind of systems?
Thank you. Purva, Watwe, we will wrap up with you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. We need to sensitize, I think I'm talking very tall, we need to sensitize the community at large. If I get good grades, good marks, I get good admission in good colleges. My parents also pressurize me to study well. So it's the parents, the universities, the community at large, which doesn't have to give so much importance to grades and marks. The children are the ones who are getting it. It's not just the teachers. So we all, as a community, like we are talking about special needs, we need to sensitize awareness and bring about. I mean, we need money for a livelihood. We need to earn money. So does the student need to earn marks? But how far do we take that? And till which grade can we say that we don't need grading? And then when can we introduce? A lot of things have to be put in, and parents have to be brought in also, because there's a lot of pressure put by the parents, which is understandable but not acceptable. So we need to look at it as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Preethi, you want to wrap up?
So just to bring in, I think many of us are talking about the way forward. Bringing you back to what Dr. Sridhar addressed right at the beginning, the new education policy, the national education policy is drafted and it's in discussion right now. And in a couple of weeks' time, it probably will get implemented. A couple of things that really excite me about the national education policy. Number one, the word play for the first time has been featured on a policy document at the national level. So I think that itself is a big breakthrough when it comes to the education system in India. Again, I see that in the national education policy, a lot of importance has been given to early years, which has been missing so far, right? So after about 35 years, when they have revisited this policy, the early years, which till now was under the Ministry of the Women and Child Development, has now been moved as per the recommendations of the NEP. It has now been said that it will come under the education department. So finally, we will have some funds allocated to the early years. So I'm really excited about that. But most importantly, I see again and again the language in the national education policy is about child-centric education, and they are talking about it not just at the preschool level. They speak about how education in elementary and secondary has to be multidimensional, it has to be interdisciplinary, and it has to include all students. And so this is something that they have continued up to the tertiary level. So it's exciting that these terms have come into the policy, but how will that percolate down to the student? Finally, it has to go through the hierarchies of the multiple organizations, the DSERT or the UGC, and hundreds of organizations before it translates into what we all, this community has come here to do. So if we are to see that translate well, we have to work towards sensitizing, like just now Purva said, we have to work towards sensitizing everybody and all the stakeholders in this community. So I haven't had the chance please do look at the National Education Policy and read up about it, because the more we support this kind of a progressive policy, the more it will benefit all of us. So please do take a look at the policy.
Thank you, Preethi. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It gave me a glimpse into, how people view grading and assessment. And I would like to meet with you more in future sessions with more angles to the grading and assessment policy that we would like to see as part of the NEP. So thank you all for giving your valuable time to be here on this Zoom call. And I really enjoyed interacting with all of you. Thank you very much. Venkatesh, would you like to put the last slide up, just so they know if they want to contact us? The contact slide at the very end. And I'm looking at the chat, and there are some really nice comments in the chat as well. We will take all of this into consideration to form the next round of questions to talk about. So here is some information, contact information about all of us. And good evening to everybody, and have a restful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
One last word. We will be sending you some questionnaires after this, as just as follow-up of this discussion, a small poll, and we request all of you to take time out to do that for us. Yeah? Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Ramanathan, for coming from Canada. She's logged in from there. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you.